Hi, I'm Rabbi Marc Katz from Temple near Tamid in Bloomfield, New Jersey. And this week's Torah portion is called Parshat Vayishlach. I want to concentrate on one line in the portion, a line that we often don't talk about. The portion's famous because Jacob wrestles with God and gets a new name. Jacob reunites with his brother Esau for the first time after not seeing him for 20 years. God even appears to Jacob later on in the portion, giving Jacob a reiteration of the name Yisrael, which he gave him during the wrestling match. But stuck in the middle, in chapter 35, verse 8, we have a line that basically says that Rebekah's wet nurse Deborah died and was buried. Now, it's not clear exactly what this means, and so the commentators for generations have fought over that exact line. In the end, there's a kind of a consensus that's created, specifically around some of the more notable commentators, people like Rashi, people like Nachmanides, which basically says that line is a euphemism, that whether or not Rebekah ever had a wet nurse named Deborah, and whether or not Deborah visited Jacob wherever he was, that it's meant to say not that Deborah died, but euphemistically to allude to the fact that Rebekah died. Now, we don't actually have any log of Rebekah's death. We don't have a log of Rebekah's burial, unlike some of the other of our matriarchs and patriarchs. And Rebekah's death, we know, based on kind of legend or midrash, is significant because she's buried in the cave of Machpelah, the place where Abraham and Sarah are buried, where Isaac is buried, the place where eventually Jacob and Leah will be buried too. Now, the question is, why exactly would, according to our rabbis who imagine this, the Torah euphemistically speak about Deborah's death? And they come up with an answer. It's a fine answer, though I want to maybe give another thought. Their answer is that Rebekah ended up dying kind of in a shameful way, or she was buried in a shameful way. That rather than have both her kids around, rather than be mourned, rather than have the kind of funeral that one needs, because Jacob was nowhere near her, because Isaac had already passed away or was sick, and because Esau may or may not have even shown up, she was buried alone, probably by the Hittites who lived near her. And so the Torah didn't want to speak about this shameful episode of not actually having someone to care for her. But I think there's something else at play too. We have to imagine that immediately after Jacob learns of Rebekah's death, we find, according to Midrash, that God appears to him, that God says to him, I am with you, and I want to reiterate your new name. And what comes from this, and why it's significant, is the fact that I think by not speaking about Rebekah, we find an incredibly human moment for our patriarchs and our matriarchs. That often we have so much trouble speaking about someone who's died, acknowledging that their death actually happened, coming to terms with the tragedy that was their death. And so the Bible, hiding the fact that Rebekah died, using a euphemism of Rebekah's wet nurse in that place, actually more than anything else, teaches us just how difficult it is to really speak about death. And in doing so, it helps us and it gives us a platform in which to explore our own challenges in dealing with death and dying. The inevitable thing is that we all are going to. Life is finite. Death and taxes, they say, are the only sure things for us. Our goal, though, is to not run away from it. When we lose someone, to confront the pain head on. And when we do that, we'll find that we don't use euphemisms anymore, but in speaking truly and accurately about the death around us, about the loved one who is now lost, we can begin to work on healing. We don't necessarily need God to appear to us and to comfort us, but by being truthful about that death, we can begin to comfort ourselves. Shabbat Shalom.